afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. I'm laughing at myself because I've done this speech for 15 years and I blow it every time. My guest this evening is John Eric Lutz. How should I call you, John? Or
Just John,
yeah.
Don, just John.
And I'm glad to have you aboard.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for inviting me.
Nice to have you, of course. And you're a fellow humanist?
I am.
And we've chatted a little bit before at the humanist meetings on Sunday mornings.
We have.
And we found out that we have some stuff that we can share with the, among ourselves with the viewers.
Sure, I'd love to, Don.
And the title of this show is Topical Issues as of November 19th, 2014. All right, shall we start?
Yes.
And I'm a little nervous right now, as you can tell. And I'm always a little nervous after all these years. And how are you? Are you nervous?
I'm doing fine. Well.
You're not nervous?
Well, Don, I'm not going to say I'm not, but I'm doing just fine.
Yeah, good. All right. So let's see, how shall we start? Your full name is? What's your full name?
John Eric Lutz.
And how'd you arrive at that name?
Well, that's an interesting. My father's name was Lutz, L-U-T-Z. It's a German name. I can trace my German family back to Germany in the 1700s, immigrated to the United States, and then came across the country to the Midwest in a covered wagon. My great-great-grandfather, John Henry Lutz. And on the way, they lost a little 2-year-old boy and had to bury him along the way. And when they arrived, they almost lost another little 2-year-old, a fellow by the name of Benjamin B. Lutz. That was my great-grandfather. Wow,
you have a good record of what was going on back then.
I do. I follow genealogy quite closely.
Oh, yes, sure. Apparently.
So the first and second name are interesting. My father wanted to name me Eric. My father was a colonel in the Air Force, and he wanted to name me Eric after a general that he knew that he respected a great deal. My mother insisted on my name being John because she wanted me to be a priest. John after John the Apostle.
Are you a recovering Catholic?
I'm a recovering Catholic for the last 45 years, Don. Yes, sir. You got that.
Sure.
So my mother won out, so my first name became John, and my second name became Eric. Mm-hmm. But I never aspired to be a priest, Don. Although my mother talked to me endlessly for years about it. We have plenty of nuns in my family. Mm-hmm. And finally I said to my mother when I was about 10 years old, I said, Mom, if I became a priest, I wouldn't be a very good priest. And she said, well, why not? And I said, because I wouldn't like it. And with that, the conversation ended.
And she let you alone?
She left me alone from that point on.
You know, I'm about 1/3 German or something like that. Yeah, my mother's side. And where and when were you born?
I was born December 7, 1946. We flew into El Paso, Texas. I was born, and off we went to California. So despite the fact I was born in El Paso, Texas, I don't have any knowledge of El Paso, Texas. One of these days I'd like to go back. The only good thing I've ever heard about El Paso, Texas is from a friend of mine who said they have the largest Harley-Davidson motorcycle dealership in Texas, in El Paso, Texas.
Thanks, I needed to know that.
Yeah, for what it's worth, though.
Yeah. As you know, I ask a trick question of my guests now and then.
Okay.
And can I ask it now or wait to and surprise you with it?
Ask a trick question now.
All right. Why were you born?
I was born because my mother and father wanted me, Don. Unlike a lot of people, I chose my parents very, very well. And I've always been pleased about that.
Uh-huh.
They wanted me.
Yeah.
So I'm firstborn, and I'm very happy about that.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
8 little brothers and sisters.
8! And you're the oldest.
I am.
And I'm the youngest of 12. So we're on the opposite ends. Yeah.
Don. I'm so happy my maternal grandmother had her 16th and last child at age 48 because that was my mother.
Wow.
And my grandfather was one of 16 as well. It's called being Catholic, Don. You know the idea.
I know.
You're the youngest of 12.
Yeah.
You know the idea.
I was an altar boy for years.
Those things happen, don't they, Don?
Yes, yes, yes. And that depression in my chest took too many.
Yes, been there and done that, Don.
So we talked a little about your cultural heritage. Anything other than German?
My mother's family is French. My mother was first generation American, French Catholic. So my grandparents were immigrants. They never became American. And I'm not sure they ever had a green card either. But then back then, I don't think they had green cards when they came over the border from Canada. I don't think they had green cards or all that kind of stuff that we talk about nowadays. My grandparents came to the United States for job opportunities.
And when you were a little kid, did you have a religious preference then, or was it one that you were born into?
I was born into Catholicism and raised Catholic. I did the First Communion and the Confirmation. And then when I went to college, I began questioning some of the precepts of the Catholic religion about, things like purgatory and limbo and hell. And do you really go to hell if you eat meat on Friday when some people don't have that issue? And so I began to call into question a lot of things about the Catholic Church, and none of it made any sense to me, Don. I just drifted away. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It happened over a period of years as I decided I had less and less in common with the Catholic Church, and come to find out I have nothing in common with the Catholic Church.
When did you discover that? When did it go that far?
In readings and hearing things about their stands on birth control, abortion, as it relates to, especially women, Don. And then all those revelations about priest abuse of young boys has just been horrible. But I was out of the Catholic Church long before that became known to the world.
And I struggled with Catholicism, and even now, occasionally something will happen, and it takes me back to when I was a little kid, a little boy. And there are some things about Catholicism that I feel sentimental about and remember. They were nice, the ritual and sitting quietly. That's one of the few times I could sit quiet for an hour or so and not have to do something or go somewhere. But do you have any fond memories of your Catholic upbringing?
Don, I can't say that I have. I went to Catholic school until I was about in 5th grade. And it was a fantastically brutal experience. I met a couple of women years ago. One was from Portland, and one was raised in Los Angeles. I was raised in Chicago, by the way. And the lady from Los Angeles was about 10 years older than me. The lady here from Portland was about 4 years older, and we were all raised Catholic. And we had remarkably similar experiences in Catholic schools, despite the fact we were from very different areas of the country, and there was a 10-year difference between myself and this oldest woman. And I'll never forget the words of Karen, the lady here from Portland that I knew. She said the nuns terrorized her.
Yeah.
And that was my feeling as well, going to Catholic school as a child. The nuns terrorized us children. And so I did not have a good experience, Don.
So you have no fond memories of your Catholic upbringing?
I do not. I do not, Don. It was, I then went to a Catholic high school for about 2 years with the Christian Brothers, who had no qualms about meting out corporal punishments to the boys. It was an all-boys school.
Yeah. And this was in Chicago?
And this is in Chicago. It was absolutely brutal, Don. Some of the corporal punishment and what I found out later on was that a lot of the parents sent their sons to this Catholic school to teach them discipline. The Christian Brothers are supposed to teach them discipline.
Yes.
I didn't have that problem, Don. I was never a bad kid. I didn't need discipline beaten into me. And so after, at the beginning of my junior year, I went to my mother and I said, I simply cannot tolerate this anymore. I'm going to drop out of school, or you send me to the local public school. And she listened to me and said, okay. And that was it for the Catholic school and at the beginning of my separation from the Catholic Church. in high school.
So you left the Catholic Church. Did you go to some other religion before you got to where you are today?
I did not.
Religion-wise.
I did not religion-wise, Don. I had a good friend of mine who invited me to the Unitarian Church. I went to 2 services, and it was just too much church-like for me. I didn't appreciate the Unitarians, even though I felt akin to some of their philosophies. But I just wanted to get away from churches completely. And so I then stumbled upon skepticism and humanism almost by accident. And I began reading about it and saying, well, gee, that's me. That's really me. I'm really a humanist at heart. And I didn't even know it. That was in my mid to late 20s.
Same thing happened to me too.
I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt very good about that. And I'll be 68 here in a couple of weeks.
How about your brothers and sisters? Are they still Catholic, or?
I'm not aware that any of my brothers and sisters are Catholic. That said, I have 3 that are fundamentalists. 1 sister and 2 brothers that are fundamentalists. My oldest sister converted Judaism so she can be buried with her Jewish husband. I think the rest are non-religious, but I don't go there. When I'm with my family, we don't talk about religion, sex, or politics. We just avoid those topics.
Yeah. So how would you characterize yourself? Atheist, agnostic, or none of the above, or what?
Okay, I like to use the word non-theist, Don.
Non-theist.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Atheism, the word has such a negative context to it. You know, like atheists eat unborn babies for breakfast. Yeah, I'm being facetious, okay?
Sure.
But the term atheist has a negative connotation to it. I finally found upon the word non-theist, which means I do not believe in God. And it's not as an in-the-face term as atheist is. But if you want to call me a non-believer, I'm okay with that too. So when I fill out questionnaires and that question comes up, non-believer, of course that's the one I check.
How about agnostic? Does that fit for you?
I'm willing to accept the fact that I don't know everything, of course. No one knows everything, but nobody's ever come back after they're dead to tell us what's going on, assuming that there is something going on after you die. So I am open to learning and researching and talking to people, but do I really believe that there's an afterlife? No, I don't. Or that there's a God looking over us with all the evil on earth? No, I don't, Don. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Did you have a period where you felt there was something missing in your life between being a Roman Catholic and being a non-theist?
Don, it was incredibly liberating to get rid of the Catholic Church in my life. At no time did I ever felt that there was something missing in my life. It was phenomenally liberating.
How do you feel about people who have other religions or beliefs?
Don, there are many people in this world, 7+ billion, who have lots of different beliefs about different things. I'm not going to change their beliefs, but I think it's appropriate that the discussion of religion should not be sacred. I mean, we discuss politics and our differing views about politics. Why couldn't we discuss our differing views about religion? Why can't you assert your opinion about particular religions if you feel that they're, I have a real difficult time to like Jehovah's Witnesses, and some of their beliefs. Is it sacred to say, well, I'm this or that and you can't challenge my beliefs? I don't believe so. I think those beliefs can and should be challenged. That said, I'm always careful about it and respectful, as I would be with someone who has different political views than I do.
It's amazing. You look at big families and see how the children go different directions as far as religion is concerned. I have 5 daughters, and they're all over the place. And their mom was Roman Catholic, and so was I. We were married Catholic and all that kind of stuff. But anyhow, it's an interesting story. How about your education? Let's talk a little about your education. Your formal education first.
Formal education, like I said, I was raised in Chicago. But about the time I was 16, I decided that I wanted to live and work on the West Coast. I blame Walt Disney for that because I used to watch the Walt Disney specials and I would say, gee, they have valleys out there like Yosemite Valley and they have mountains and they have lakes and rivers and oceans. I'm going west. So I went to Southern California for college and where I majored in zoology. And I never regret that. But then when I applied to get my doctorate, University of Illinois at the Medical Center gave me the best deal. And so I figured, well, it's not going to hurt me to go back to Illinois to get my doctorate. But I immediately left Illinois to come back to the West Coast for my residency, which I did at UC San Francisco, across the bay from Berkeley. And I worked my way up here to Oregon in 1980, never thinking that I would go to the state of Oregon, where they have lumberjacks. Never in my wildest imagination did I think I would wind up in Oregon, as we used to say it in Illinois.
Yeah.
But I've been in Oregon since 1980, and this is home, and I'm not going anywhere when I retire.
And so you took an MD?
I actually have a DDS, Don, Doctor of Dental Surgery, but my residency is in oral and maxillofacial surgery. So it's a hospital-based residency that you have to learn all kinds of things and interface with other medical specialties to learn what we do.
When we're through here, can you take a look?
I'll give you my card and make an appointment. Yes.
So when did you you retire? You're still practicing now?
I'm semi-retired right now. I'm going to be completely retired at the end of the year.
At the end of the year?
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do?
Well, I've got a couple things in mind, Don. I've been a member of the Health Volunteers Overseas for quite a bit of time.
Wonderful.
It is a non-denominational organization that sends teams of individuals, physicians, dentists, nurses, occupational therapists, physical therapists, all over the world for 2 weeks at a time. I've always wanted to do it, Don, but I've never had the opportunity being the owner-operator of a practice. But now that as an associate who's taken over my practice, I have that opportunity. I also like to teach. I used to teach on a fairly regular basis at OHSU. I've got an appointment as adjunct clinical assistant professor of surgery up there, and I may go back and do some teaching. I haven't decided yet. I like to travel. I'm an avid photographer, and I've had some wonderful trips all over the world taking photographs.
Wow.
And so I have that in mind as well, Don.
Well, when this is done, you should talk to one of my crew people. Billo is his name, and he is deeply involved with photography, and he's got some of his work here this evening that you can see, and you'll enjoy visiting with him for a few minutes when we're through.
Sure, love to, Don.
Yeah, and children. Do you have children?
Children. I have one adult son who is currently employed at an organization called AltSource. He's in the development area. He's not a programmer, but what they do is they seek out companies that need to have their off-the-shelf software modified for their own particular needs. And he enjoys doing that quite a bit. He's also a student at PCC. He's switching his major from political science to business. He thought about becoming an attorney, but he's now into the business area. We're quite proud of him. And he's also a semi-pro cyclist.
Semi-pro cyclist?
Yes, he is.
Where did you get that from?
Me. I'm an avid cyclist, Don.
I thought that was something about you. Look at how trim you are.
Thank you, Don.
And your alertness and you're alive. Yeah.
Thank you, Don.
You've been that way for a long time?
I've been this way all my life. I've benefited being physically active my entire life, physically and mentally active my entire life. I believe a professional person has no right to be other than a continuous student. And I've maintained that my entire life and will continue to maintain that.
Is your wife going to see this show?
I'm now divorced. I've been divorced for about 3.5 years, Don.
3.5 years, and that's working for you?
It's working. The marriage failed quite a while ago, and we separated and divorced about 4 years ago.
Are you available nowadays?
No, I'm with a significant other nowadays, so I'm not available.
Too bad, ladies. Too bad. You missed him.
Oh, jeez, Don. Jeez, Don.
And so, your political persuasion, how would you characterize yourself? Left, right, center, off the edge, or what?
Well, I consider myself a progressive, Don. I'm very progressive, and that's about as far left as you can get, I think,
I know.
without being a radical, okay? I'm very progressive in all areas of my life. I support women's rights, gay marriage, legalization of recreational marijuana. I think people have the right to do what they want to do without the government overseeing their personal lives.
But you're not a radical.
I don't consider myself a radical, no. I consider myself a
There are
progressive.
some people who would, I'm like you, I'm pretty much, we're cut from the same cloth.
I'm glad to hear that, Don.
I'm a leftist, an old-fashioned liberal. Old-fashioned, when liberal meant something different than it means nowadays when you say liberal.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Any memberships in political, social, or civic organizations worth mentioning right now?
A member of the American Humanist Association, the Humanist of Greater Portland, Vancouver. I let my membership in the ACLU lapse, but I still get the literature. I should probably rejoin. Thank you, Don.
Why'd you let it lapse?
You know, I'm not sure why. I lapsed when I got divorced and had to move, and it just lapsed. But
I asked the question because some people resign the Skokie thing in Illinois, and now and then there's been something about every 20 years or so, something coming up where so many members of the ACLU are unhappy with the official position of the ACLU on the particular issue, and then they get mad and run away. Well, I thought about running away a couple of times over the years, but I stayed with it because I've been a member now, let's see, 324 years, I think. Away for the ACLU.
yes, civil liberties are very, very important to all of us, whether people realize it or not.
What's happening to our civil liberties nowadays?
Well, of course, they're always being attacked by the right.
Yes.
The right wants more control over your personal liberties and less control over corporations and banks and financial institutions. They want to see the wealthy become wealthier, but they want to make sure that they're in your life, in your bedroom, when it comes to decisions about what you do with others, whether you smoke marijuana or not. So they're always under attack. That said, we're making progress, Don. We're making a lot of progress. I mean, think about it. Gay marriage is now on the map in how many different states? Legalization of marijuana is now in 3 different states.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't long ago that interracial marriage was illegal in many states.
Yes, yes.
Even just back in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just crazy. I mean, we're well aware that women did not have the right to vote to the early 1920s, but people didn't have the right to marry outside of their race.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Mm-hmm.
People forget about that. That had to go to the United States Supreme Court to get all of those state laws revoked. So we're making a lot of progress about civil liberties, but we need to keep our guard up and continue to support civil liberties, even if sometimes we disagree about allowing Nazis to march in Skokie,
Yes.
Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
That's their right. People may not agree, but Americans have the right to assemble. Okay?
Mm-hmm. And you
protest.
don't see any of those civil rights now under threat?
They're always under threat by the right.
Mm-hmm.
Always under threat by the right. Abortion is probably the #1 issue
Yes.
that's under attack in how many different states, with Republican state legislatures and governors signing laws in nefarious ways to shut down abortion clinics, not outright, but in maneuvering around so the clinics have to shut down in how many different states, Texas being the big one. So human rights, especially as it relates to women's rights, reproductive rights, is under attack big time as we speak. Roe versus Wade may be legal, but a lot of these states are finding ways to eliminate abortion as we know it.
Yes, so it's a constant battle.
It's a constant battle, Don. We must always be aware of what's going on the political level, or something will get by us.
Yes. Okay, 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll take a break and come back to the meat of the show. Are there any persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or admired or looked up to? Any names come to mind for you?
I'll tell you a name that comes to mind. There's a fellow in Washington who claims he's a Christian. Okay? He lives in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
President Obama claims to be a Christian, but you know what? I think he's really a humanist.
Really?
I really do.
Mm-hmm.
He has compassion and empathy for everyone, regardless of their background,
Yeah.
regardless of their religious take. regardless of their ethnicity, their nationality. He may claim to be a Christian, but I believe he's more humanist than anything else. So I have a great deal of respect for Barack Obama.
A great deal of respect for Barack Obama. Does he walk the talk?
He has an extraordinarily difficult job.
Mm-hmm. Just to be sure we're not doing a kumbaya during the whole hour here,
Yeah. He has been remarkably successful to date, but he's been remarkably hampered by our Congress, members of our Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he has a lot of criticism, but I'm a supporter of Barack Obama and an admirer of him. I'm also an admirer of many of the scientists that have gone before us. Charles Darwin is a hero of mine.
Of course. All right. And any persons from the past that you particularly have a bad feeling or impression of, excluding Hitler?
Well, of course, the monsters of the world, Hitler and Stalin. Yes. There was, people like Joe McCarthy, the senator from Wisconsin, that promulgated all the communist hysteria in the early 50s. What a terrible deed. I tend not to concentrate on those evil people and think of the wonderful people that have come before us, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, who I actually had the opportunity to meet one time.
Did you really?
Unbelievable, yes.
Did you shake his hand or touch him?
I did not.
Darn, because I was going to shake your hand.
I did not. No, I did not.
How?
This was some
how
of
this happened?
This was interesting. I was going, before I transferred to UCLA, I went to 1 year at Santa Monica City College.
Yeah.
And across the street from Santa Monica City College, there was a martial arts studio. And I decided to take martial arts for protection, not because I'm a small person. I'm not a big person. And I'm in this martial arts studio, and I see a large black limousine drive up, and 3 or 4 black men exit the limousine into the barbershop next door, which was a barbershop owned and operated by black barbers. And I immediately recognized Martin Luther King. And I thought, this is an opportunity I can't pass up. This is like 1966, I think.
Yeah.
And I left with the martial arts studio with my outfit on. I went over and I sat down and I asked him about, he was very much against the then Vietnam War, 1966 maybe, and he was very much against, and I wanted to know why. And he said it was because the disproportionate...
You asked him?
Yeah. The disproportionate burden that fell on minorities. Minorities were being drafted left and right, whereas wealthy white boys were not. They found ways of getting out of the draft. Not me, by the way. I did serve in the Army. And he felt that it was an unjust war to begin with, and it was even more unjust on minorities who were drafted disproportionately compared to whites and sent over to Vietnam to be killed for nothing. And that was very informative to me, because at the time I was thinking the Vietnam War may have been a good thing for us to be doing. That only existed for a short time.
And you had a brief conversation with him?
Brief conversation with him, and I thanked him and left. And so it was just serendipity that I actually got to meet Martin Luther King.
Son of a gun.
Just talk about being in the right place at the right time. And so that's my story about Martin Luther King.
That's the memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the mainstream or corporate media. Do you watch or read the mainstream media?
I do not. I tend to follow the news on the Huffington Post, the Daily Kos. I don't read. I don't read the newspapers. I don't watch the news. Again, I tend to get my news through the internet.
Alternative, yeah. All right, let's take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about the important stuff.
Okay, Don.
Ready? The mic's off. Okay, thanks for staying tuned. We're back. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. And my guest is John Lutz.
Eric Lutz.
John Eric Lutz. Okay.
Thanks, Don.
I'm fading. I need some grapes, yeah. And the title of the show is Topical Issues as of November 19th, 2014. So let's go to your questions, okay?
Sure.
And the first one we're going to address is, how do the recent measures in this midterm election stack up? And what do you think about those issues?
Well, we had a number of measures, that we all voted for 2 weeks ago, some of which have little, if any, bearing on the average Oregonian. Whether or not to let judges enlist in the Army Reserve is kind of a non-issue for most of us, I think. That affects how many people. But I thought there were a number of measures that really do impact us. Some of the measures that passed and some of the measures that did not pass.
And for Oregonians.
For Oregonians, yes. For example, Measure 88 was the driver ID card. That lost substantially. It was overwhelmingly defeated, 67 to 33%. I think that's a real shame.
Yes.
Why do I think it's a real shame? Because undocumented drivers are not required to pass any sort of knowledge about rules of the road. They're not required to demonstrate any kind of driver competency.
Yeah. So they're a hazard.
Yeah, they are a hazard on the road when they simply get behind a wheel and drive with no identification whatsoever. A driver's ID card will allow them to take and pass the driver's knowledge and demonstrate themselves as competent and get insurance, because Oregon law demands that every driver have liability insurance. For undocumented people, that doesn't exist. So it would actually make it safer for Oregonians if our undocumented immigrants had an ID card.
Sure.
Nonetheless, the fearmongers prevailed, thinking that an ID card from Oregon was somehow going to magically confer upon them citizenship, which does not happen. Only the federal government can do that, not the state. So I think that was a real shame that went down to flaming defeat.
Why do you think those people didn't want that to pass?
Well, I think a lot of them feared that if the state issues them a state ID card, that would be tantamount to allowing them to become legal immigrants as opposed to illegals, okay? And that simply is not true.
And what would happen if they became legal immigrants? They would tend to vote for Democrats?
Yes, Don, they do.
Okay.
Minorities and young folks tend to vote Democratic. That's correct. And so there's this huge push on the Republican side to limit voting, by requiring all sorts of identification that some young people do not, and certainly older minorities do not have the kind of identification that states are now requiring. And you know what? It's become very effective. Studies have shown these voter ID laws perpetrated in a number of these states is very effective in limiting voters, and the voters who typically vote Democratic.
Yes. So that then they can run the country.
That's right.
Yeah. So how about the other issues that affect Oregonians? You want to mention
other issues affect Oregonians. We Measure 91, the marijuana measure, passed fairly handily, 55 to 45%, despite the fact the last couple of marijuana measures failed. But this one finally passed. How does that benefit Oregonians? Well, in a larger context, the war on drugs is a total failure. We've spent billions of dollars fighting the war on drugs, and marijuana, even though it is a mind and mood-altering drugs, is not in the same category as opioids, such as heroin or cocaine.
Right.
It produces dramatically fewer domestic violence sort of issues. Alcohol unleashes anger and aggression in some people who abuse it.
Yes.
And take it out on their spouses, partners, or children. That doesn't happen with a mood-altering drug like marijuana. There is no point in lumping marijuana with illegal drugs. It simply is not a good idea. The benefits of having marijuana legal is it's now controlled by the OLCC. we get to make money off the taxes selling marijuana, as they have done in Colorado. And the tax money in Colorado is going towards education. Marijuana is not a gateway drug to other substances. We know that. And when you look at drugs in general, entirely to include alcohol, alcohol produces more grief in more people than all of the other substances combined. Marijuana does not.
So you're glad that that initiative passed?
I am delighted that initiation has passed. It does not become legal until July 1st of next year, so those who are inclined to want to, who think it's legal now, no, not till July 1st of next year.
Mm-hmm. And what other issues that were on the ballot that you?
We had an issue that was incredibly close. The GMO ballot, genetically modified organisms, failed by an incredibly close margin, 50.2% to 49.8%. And my question is, do Oregonians have the right to know what's in their food? Well, of course we do. And if you were to buy any foodstuff at any store, look at the package and how they list all the ingredients, the weight, all the ingredients by order they appear, the percent fat, percent trans fat, calories from protein and carbohydrates. There's all kinds of things on the packages of food we buy. What's wrong with having whether it's GMO or not?
Why are people against having GMO information labeling on foodstuffs?
I think one of the reasons was they thought that labeling GMO foods would increase the cost of foodstuffs to the average public. I don't believe that's the case, Don.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that we already put unbelievable labeling on foods now. What's wrong with adding just one more label? There are GMO processed foods in this package, or there's non-GMO. In fact, when you go to the grocery store nowadays, Don, as I do, like Whole Foods or New Seasons, you see a lot of packages that say non-GMO.
Mm-hmm.
They're already starting to label their non-GMO foods non-GMO. There's nothing wrong with labeling those foods that are GMO.
All right, let's spend a little more time on those issues because there's so much more to talk about and time is going by.
Sure, love to, Don.
What else you want to talk about?
Well, we have a lot of issues with candidates. This year we had, in the state of Oregon, we elected, of course, all 5 members of Congress. They all got reelected,
Mm-hmm.
by the way. All the incumbents got reelected. We had a race for governor. The incumbent governor, Kitzhauer, got reelected. We had a race for federal senate. The incumbent Merkley got reelected.
Mm-hmm.
On the Oregon legislature side, we now have majorities in both the Senate and House of Representatives. They're strongly Democratic. In the Senate, we have 18 Democrats and 12 Republicans. In the House, we have 32 Democrats and 25 Republicans. So basically, the very blue state of Oregon has a very blue state legislature and governor in Salem.
So is that good?
Okay, most people, we elect candidates, but what we're really doing is electing a party's policy.
Uh-huh.
What is their agenda? And unless they're a peculiar candidate for one reason or the other, we may really like a particular candidate or not. We basically elect the people whose policies we want to see come into effect.
Mm-hmm.
Oregon is a very blue state, and we have a very blue state legislature and governor.
Blue meaning progressive or liberal or left or what?
Liberal. I would say liberal, maybe not progressive.
Uh-huh.
And so I anticipate when our state legislature meets here in January
Yeah.
that the Democratic agenda will prevail for most of the legislature.
I have trouble talking in terms of Democratic and Republican because depending on the state or what part of the country you're talking about, I like progressive or liberal or conservative, and anyhow, those kinds of terms are kind of foggy anymore. Democrat has a funny connotation for me anymore because there are some people, for example, in this recent the XL pipeline,
Yes.
there were a number of Democrats who voted for it. So I think that's beyond whether it's a Democrat or Republican. It's whether you're conservative or liberal or progressive or something of that nature.
I'm not sure the Keystone Pipeline would fall under the category of human rights or liberties. I think it's a business decision that has environmental questions that I think remain somewhat unanswered. It's certainly an issue that's coming up in the new Congress, with the Republicans wanting to pass it and President Obama wanting to study it more as it impacts the environment.
What do you think of it?
I don't have an answer for that, Don. I haven't studied it enough. So I'm neutral as of right now. But as time goes on, I probably will develop an opinion.
In 2016, you're going to vote for Hillary Clinton?
I will vote for whoever the Democratic candidate is, unless it's someone just totally off the wall bizarre. And I don't think that's going to happen. So if Hillary Clinton is the nominee for the Democratic Party, I will vote for her, yes.
How about Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders?
I'm a supporter of Elizabeth Warren and the independent Bernie Sanders. I like them both very much. I'm very happy to see that those two are in our Senate and probably remain there for a good many years.
All right, let's move on to some of the questions because time is flying by.
Sure, Don.
What does it mean for Oregonians to have one party's value system dominate at the state level? And what does that mean, one party's value system dominating at the state level?
Again, like I said, a lot of people vote a particular party into office as opposed to individuals. And here in the state of Oregon, we have an all-Democratic state legislature and Democratic governor. Of course, that's not the same in all states, and certainly not the same as on the federal level, where we now have the representatives are strongly Republican, and the Senate has just switched over to a majority Republican. Yet we do have a president who's Democratic. And Don, it's not unusual to see for Americans to vote one party in their legislature and the opposite party in the executive branch. That is not unusual.
Yes.
What it does is there's a lot of checks and balances on our country, as you well know. Of course, we have the judiciary. But when it comes to making laws and signing them, sometimes we have different parties and different branches of the government. It does require a lot of compromise. That said, bipartisanism, as we used to know it from like World War II up into the 80s, is gone.
Yes.
We now have polarized governments, totally polarized governments, and the best example is what we see in Washington, where the members of Congress have voted against the Affordable Care Act how many times? Dozens of times. For what purpose? It's a waste of time. And now we have a Democratic-led Senate, not a veto-proof numbers, but it's going to make it very difficult for progress to be made. This Congress in the last 6 years has produced the fewest number of bills ever for decades and decades. And to think that that's going to be any better in the next 2 years, no, it's not.
It's scary. It's scary.
It's scary. Yes, Don.
Well, let's kind of go more broad or national or global in our discussion here. Is America an empire?
Well, I wouldn't consider it as an empire as a country that has satellite countries that they're dominating. That was the case in the 1800s, where countries in Europe literally went to Africa and took over various countries. The Belgium Congo.
Yes.
Things like that.
Portugal.
Yes, Portugal. Literally, we're in Africa and control various countries. We, the United States, America, is not an empire. We're a country. We're a democratic country.
Some of us would think that if you have bases in so many countries around the world, and American money is such an influence, until people in the UN vote the way America tells them to vote, that those are characteristics of an empire.
Good point, Don.
Okay.
It brings the question why we have so many military bases throughout the world.
What's your answer?
It's ridiculous. We are not the world's policemen. And the most ridiculous thing is starting 2 wars in sovereign nations for no good reasons whatsoever. They're going to cost American taxpayers something like $3 trillion.
What would be the reasons we're starting the wars in those nations?
The reasons.
The real reasons.
Well, I think the real reason for starting the war in Iraq was oil money.
Yeah.
Okay? There's no question about it. It was not weapons of mass destruction, which never existed, never have. Bush just wanted to get back at Saddam Hussein, who wanted to get back at his father for the Gulf War, the original Gulf War. He also had religious reasons, thinking that he was, on the right side of God, and Saddam Hussein was on the wrong side of God. As far as the war in Afghanistan, why we didn't learn from the former Soviet Union, who went into Afghanistan in the 1980s and got their butt kicked, I have no idea. Why didn't we simply put a bounty on Osama bin Laden's head, like $1 million? Just $1 million. Put a bounty on his head.
You said a number of times, I don't have any idea. For me, I'd like to look further and have some idea and look at the real reasons why these things occur. Why are we so supportive of Israel until it seems like, this is my soapbox now, that Israel is deciding what America is going to be about in the Middle East. What do you think about the Israel-Palestinian conflict situation?
Don, that conflict has been going on since World War II.
Yeah.
So what, that's 70 years that conflict has been going on.
What do you think of it?
I think it's a shame. Will it ever be resolved? I don't know. I think we've given Israel more than they deserve. My sense is that there's a strong support of Israel from conservative fundamentalist Republicans.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why is they think the Savior is going to come back to Israel. And when he does, to save humanity, if you believe in that, they want to make sure Israel is still around as a state, as a free and democratic state.
I'm not sure how objective this discussion is going to be on this issue right now.
Well, I understand that, Don. But one thing can be said, Israel is the only democratic nation in that part of the world. Without our support, they probably would have been overrun a long time ago by all of their neighbors, if not, at least some, if not all of their neighbors, who would like to see them go on forever. Supporting a democratic nation, a truly democratic nation, is magnanimous. But
yeah, why do you think they would be overrun if the U.S. didn't support Israel? Why is it that their neighbors would overrun them?
Arabs, Muslims typically don't like Jews and the Jewish faith. The Jews have been persecuted from thousands of years.
The Zionists persecuting the Palestinians right now?
I recognize that, Don. It's a bad deal. I think Israel should be taken to task about the way they treat the Palestinians.
They have been. The UN resolutions, one after the other, and Israel simply ignores them.
I recognize that,
and
Don.
Netanyahu has said recently, we will talk and talk and talk, but we will never give up our settlements and give up where we are in Palestine. When we will talk.
I recognize that, Don. It's a real bad deal
to have a
for
fight
the Palestinians.
between us here.
Yeah, I understand it's a bad deal for the Palestinians that the Israelis have perpetrated on them, taking their land, subjugating them as second-class citizens. They ought to have their own country. That said, are we going to see that in our lifetimes, Don? I don't know. And I don't have the answer.
Think so.
I don't know, Don. It's a crazy situation.
Let's go back domestic for a moment.
Sure.
All right. Ferguson. What's happening in Ferguson? What do you think about that policeman killing that boy?
I understand he was shot on 6 gunshot wounds, as I recall.
Yes.
Of course, I'm not familiar with the intimate details, but it's hard for me to understand why someone who stole a cigar out of a convenience stop deserves to be shot 6 times and killed.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me. I strongly suspect if he was white, he would not have been shot, Don.
Yeah.
I strongly suspect that.
Well, then he was shot because part of the reason is the attitude and the belief of the authorities in Ferguson and the white population is such that they would support a law enforcement official essentially executing a black boy.
Don, we've had that same problem here in Portland. And when are policemen ever taken to task for doing those sorts of things, to include a couple right here in Portland? They never are. Why is that, Don? They'll have these investigations,
What's your question?
but nothing ever comes
What's the
out.
answer? Why is it?
Well, I think citizens need to step up and hold the police accountable. And if they flat out murder a citizen, they ought to be held accountable.
Has anybody tried to step up before, like Martin Luther King?
Of course Martin Luther King stepped up.
And what happened to him?
He was assassinated.
Yes. Is there class warfare going on in America today?
I wouldn't call it a class warfare, Don. We've come a long way from segregation. One of the concerns I have about discrimination is that white Americans, and this is something I've been thinking about, okay? I don't know if this is true.
Sure.
White Americans may say, you know, segregation is dead. We need not worry about segregation anymore. Why? Because we have a black president. Look, we elected a black president. Why should we worry about segregation anymore, about discrimination anymore? Segregation and discrimination is alive and well in this country, despite the fact that we have a half-black president.
Mm-hmm.
He's just as white as he is black, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He's 50% each. So, I saw something the other day. It said, if Obama was president of Kenya, he would be the first white president of Kenya. Okay?
Yeah.
Go figure.
So, what's wrong with America today? Give me one or two things that are wrong, that are serious, wrong with America.
Well, what's wrong? The economy. Okay?
Okay.
Now, I want to read you something, Don.
Of course.
And this reflects our recent election. And I have to give credit where credit's due. This fellow is a Canadian. His name is Richard Brunt from Victoria, British Columbia. And he publishes something, and I'll read it very quickly because it isn't very long. Mm-hmm. And I want to comment on it.
We've got about three and a half minutes left.
3.5 minutes. Many of us
go ahead.
Canadians are confused by the U.S. midterm elections. Consider, right now in America, corporate profits are a record high. The country's adding 200,000 jobs per month. Unemployment is below 6%. U.S. gross national product growth is the best in the organized world. The dollar is at its strongest level in years. The stock market is near record highs. Mm-hmm. Gasoline prices are falling. There's no inflation. Interest rates are the lowest in 30 years. Oil imports are declining. U.S. oil production is rapidly increasing, and the deficit is rapidly declining.
Yes.
And the wealthy are still making astonishing amounts of money. I'll get back to that. America is leading the world once again and respected internationally, in sharp contrast to the Bush years. Obama brought soldiers home from Iraq and killed Osama bin Laden. So Americans vote for the party that got you into this mess that Obama just dug you out of? This defies reason. When you are done with Obama, could you send him our way? Now, this is all true, but what it doesn't say something very important, Don. It doesn't say that all Americans are improving economically. The middle class is sinking, Don. When he says the wealthy are still making astonishing amounts of money, he's correct, but not the average person. The average person is sinking, Don, and that's one of the serious difficulties we have in this country. The middle class is failing.
And what can we do about it? We got about a minute and a half more.
Well, we can readjust the tax code.
Okay.
Bush Jr. Minimized taxes on the wealthy and corporations. The concentration of wealth at the top 1% is absolutely astonishing. Most Americans have no idea how much wealth the 1% owns in America. And they underestimate the fact that they are sinking steadily. We need to do something about that. And first thing we should do is redo the tax code, making those who have the money pay it up.
So how can we redo the tax code with the people who are running our government that don't want us
it's
to
not going to
redo
happen.
the tax code?
I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. It's wishful thinking, Don. But who knows? Maybe in the future we can do something about it.
Well, because time is running out, we better stop now, because I want some time left over for you to tell the viewers whatever you want to say to them about what happened here tonight or whatever else is on your mind. And take a minute or two to look at that camera and talk to the viewers.
Okay, well, I appreciate your inviting me.
Number 3.
Yes, I appreciate you inviting me here, Don. It's been very, very nice for you to do that. Let me expound on some of the things I hold near and dear to my heart.
Sure.
For example, civil liberties is number one. And that includes everything we hold near and dear to us as human beings. The right to be who we are, marry who we are, smoke marijuana if we choose to, legal access to safe and abortions. I think the middle class needs to be aware that they are sinking. And just for the record, Don, I'm in the 1%. I benefited hugely from George W. Bush's tax cuts. There was nothing I could do about it, but I truly do think of the middle class because I was raised in a very middle class family as one of 9, as you know. I feel extraordinarily fortunate to be where I'm in today.
Okay. So, looks like we're winding down. We better stop now so that you can put up some public service announcements, Mr. E. And I've enjoyed visiting with you.
Thank you, Don. Me too.
Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Okay, to watch my shows on the web, go to Don Baham YouTube. Google Don Baham YouTube, and there's a whole bunch of shows on there. You can choose which ones you want to watch. And the ACLU is a wonderful organization. Go to www.aclu.org to learn more about the ACLU so you can join us. And John's going to rejoin.
Yes, sir.
And we got to end corporate personhood. Go to move-to-amend.org to amend the Constitution and say that corporations are not persons and money is not speech. And what else do we have, Mr. E, Mr. Director? Humanists and humanism. Go to www.americanhumanist.org to learn more about humanists and humanism. Alliance for Democracy, that's a great organization that works locally here and around the country about political and social issues to do with the betterment of humankind and America. And I got to tell you about KFC. Not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable. To you too, and you too, and you too. Thanks again.
Thanks, Don. My pleasure.